Welcome everybody to our real estate investor workshop. Today we'll be discussing property management and related services with our special guest speaker, Lena Guirguis. For those of you that have not met me before, my name is Michael Matthew. I've been a professional accountant for more than 30 years. And my international practice increasingly focuses on both real estate investors and real estate builders. I'm a CFO for a home builder. I own a condo in the Toronto area, and currently I'm looking for a small apartment building in Texas, specifically in the Houston area. In terms of services, I provide entity structuring, which is setting up corporations both in Canada and the US, operational and tax consulting and planning, and tax return preparation on both sides of the border. So tonight, what we'll be talking about is property management with our special guest speaker, Lena. And before we get into the good stuff, we have to keep my lawyers happy, which is with a brief disclaimer. None of the information provided in this presentation is given as tax, accounting, or legal advice. It shall not be relied upon as such. None of the materials are to be construed as a solicitation, recommendation, or offer to buy or sell any security, product, property, or instrument. And while I do my best to keep the information as up to date as possible, a court case can come out tomorrow. Our friends in Ottawa could finally put something into effect that was just a proposal and now becomes law tomorrow. And that may change part of the presentation. So please, before you undertake any real estate investment, please do check with your advisors. So we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. In the meantime, please use the chat to put your questions in so you don't forget. And for those of you that have more detailed questions, I'm available for a complimentary 30-minute consultation. My email address, George, can you just put that in the chat for everybody? Is, as you see on the screen, and I think George will have it in the chat for you in just a moment. And we can set up a mutually convenient time to have our discussion. Our next event will be June 30th. As you know, we like to stick to the last Thursday of the month at the 7 p.m. and the topic will be announced later. So please grab a pen and paper or open a document on your computer and we'll get started with the main event. So Lena Guirguis is a full-time real estate investor with a focus on distressed multifamily properties to buy, rehab, and hold. She's also the co-founder of NV Property Management, a full-service real estate asset management firm offering a variety of solutions to landlords looking to maximize their profits and minimize their headaches. So Lena, welcome to our presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So I thought we could have just a sort of a Q&A session, but before we get into that part of it, I noticed I myself was greatly affected by the recent storm, such that we were without power for almost a day and a half.
Wow.
Now, did that storm also affect your business?
Nope. I mean, it kept us very busy because a lot of our properties had issues, but here, like where we're like at home, nothing happened here. Our office, so we have a new office we're opening that is under construction on Yonge. That was without power for about 2 days. So construction had halted, and you know, once you lose 2 days, things become a mess.
Yeah, well,
these things become a mess because you know, scheduling then becomes a whole other situation. But otherwise, we were very, very fortunate. Like I didn't even lose shingles on my roof, thank goodness.
yeah, well, you were lucky. Now, what sort of problems were some of your properties that you're managing have?
Okay, so in Ottawa, they had no power. for anywhere between 3 to 4 days, depending on the location. Many of the single family in the towns that we have out there lost shingles. There were trees that had fallen. I had a couple tenants whose cars are now, in the midst of trying to get sorted out between them, the city, their insurance. We had obviously loss of power, which then causes, all kinds of situations. We had a refrigerator that was fried because of power surges. So it's been fun. It's been fun. Hamilton is all shingle issues with 2 basements that ended up with a lot of water coming into them. And then we didn't have any issues in Niagara Falls. We didn't have any issues in the GTA. And thank God, nothing in Cornwall.
It sounds like you had your hands full for the last few days.
It's been fun. It's been very, very fun.
All right. So I have a few questions I'm hoping you can answer.
I will
So
try.
what is one of the most common yet important things that are overlooked by investors when purchasing a rental property?
Oh, well, okay. So everybody knows they have to have a power team and everybody knows they have to do diligence. But nobody seems to seek out a property manager before they start shopping for property in the area. And I don't know why. We didn't do it either. That's how I ended up becoming a property manager. So I'm not here to say that you have to have a property manager, but I'm here to say that you have to understand that you are going to be a property manager. And what does that look like in the market that you're looking at? Like, it's great to find a property that has really great numbers, but there's a reason why the numbers look so good, right? Nobody sells performing assets. And if they're selling a non-performing asset, there's a reason that asset is not performing. And I promise you that the reason your asset doesn't perform is only because of the way it's being managed. You could have the worst lawyer and the worst realtor on the face of the planet, and you will still recover if you're capable of managing that asset and you understand what is needed to bring it back to life. But you could have the best property with the best lawyers and the best realtors. And at the end of the day, if you don't know what you're doing and you put a professional tenant in there, or you have a property manager who's nothing more than a glorified superintendent, you're going to go bankrupt. It's a guarantee. 5 years max is what I would give you. And with the way the LTV is today, probably less than that. I know, sounds scary. It's not. It's just a little bit of education beforehand. But people seem to do it after the fact. Yeah, so learn the laws, understand what's required, and then, decide, is this an area I want to be in and can I do it? And if I can't, is there somebody who can help me?
I think a lot of it is people don't appreciate what a property manager can or should do. And you can't, for instance, in Ontario, you can't close a property without involving a lawyer. It's just not possible. But
Correct.
as you've pointed out, you can close a property without engaging a property manager.
Yep.
And so part of why I started this group is to educate real estate investors as to who they need to form a relationship with so that they don't have to struggle right out of the gate, as so many of us have done.
Yes, myself included. Like a lot of what I tell you, excuse the raspiness, this all came on this morning, but we did the same thing. We went in there like, whatever. And I mean, I took some time to read a little bit of the landlord and tenant board's like 700-page legislation, but I mean, I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. So everything that I share with you is all 100% based on my own personal experience. Like, you think I'm making some of it up, I'm not. You can't write this stuff. And, it's getting to be a little bit more common. So let's maybe nip the problem in the bud.
You made an interesting point about the size of the written legislation, because I started out my real estate career in a way in university when I volunteered at the student housing clinic. And essentially we're helping students with landlord problems. Back then, the Landlord Tenant Act, I believe, was the official name of it. The whole
Okay.
thing was maybe 50 pages and really easy to read. And so I just read it and read it and read it, and thought I knew it very, very well. That's no longer the case, because I think the current legislation is called Residential Tenancies Act. Is that right?
Yep, the RTA.
Yeah. And so what does a property manager have to do in respect to that act?
Okay, so there's a few things, and whether it's your property manager or you, there are certain things that you have in terms of obligations under the Residential Tenancies Act. You also have obligations that are put on you under the Human Rights Tribunal and the Fair Housing Act. And then there's just, being a decent human being and a smart business person. So like, there's a whole combination of things. The purpose of the Residential Tenancies Act is to try and make decent human beings out of large corporations who just don't care about anything other than the bottom line. So that's the first thing that as investors, small scale investors, we need to understand is this act was not written for us. But because we decided that we want to play this game, we have to follow their rules. And their rules are designed so that nameless, faceless corporations can't cause people to live in squalor. So they have very basic rules. Every time your tenant complains about something that is legitimate, you have to fix it, whether it's their fault or not. And once you fixed it, then you can go to the board, and the board will decide if the tenant is financially responsible or not for the damages that you had to fix or whatever it is. There is no question of, my tenant called me, the fridge doesn't work, it was working last week, I know they screwed it up, do I have to fix it? Yeah, you do. There is no choice. You have to keep these properties free of vermin. So the tenant calls you, I've got bed bugs, I've got fleas, I've got cockroaches, I've got rats. Common question, well, do I have to fix it? It wasn't there before the tenant got there. Yeah, you do. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. Bed bugs, especially, the landlord and tenant board will never put that on a tenant, ever. Like, the probabilities of a landlord winning for the cost of remediation of bed bugs at LTV is like almost impossible. And the reason for it is because the landlord and tenant views the bed bugs as a bug that's a transient piece of, vermin that could jump on you on a bus or jump on you in a cabin. You would never know, and you're going to bring it home, and until it's too late, you'd never know. So it's not the tenant's fault. Okay, cost of doing business. Snow removal, lawn care, this is all on you. Now, it's not written in the act where it says the landlord shall provide lawn care and snow removal. No, what it says is the landlord is responsible and cannot pass on the duties of complying to local bylaws and provincial, building code. You can't pass that on to your tenant. So bylaw determines when you have to clear your sidewalks and your walkways, when your snow has to be cleared. Bylaw determines how much you're allowed to allow your grass to grow, when it has to be cut, and they are the ones who issue the fines. So when you hire your tenant or you have a lease agreement that puts this responsibility on the tenant, if the tenant doesn't do it and bylaw comes out, at the end of the day, when the tenant goes to tribunal and says, not my problem, tribunal's going to agree because there's already precedent set. So there have already been cases that have been overthrown by the superior courts in Ontario that have let landlords know you can't have this in your lease agreement. You cannot put this onto your tenant in your lease agreement. You have to have a separate agreement with your tenant like you would any other contractor, and you have to compensate this tenant. So there's what has happened and what is written, right, in the RTA itself. And then there is what has been decided by the LTB, which is the Landlord and Tenant Board. And then there is what has been decided when the LTB judgments have been appealed, right? So if you're me, you'll sit when you can't sleep and you're going to go through Cannily and you're going to read everybody's insane judgments, right? So that you have an understanding of what the current adjudicators are doing, what, current judges are doing, because every time a non-decent human decides that they're going to try and get away with something, all of us get punished for it, right? Because now new precedent has been set, and that is the precedent that your tenant's paralegal is going to be able to bring up. So you, the landlord, have to maintain your lawns, you have to maintain your snow, you have to fix the repairs, you have to make sure that there's no vermin, you have to ensure that they have vital services, right? So they have to have hot water. This is important because if your tenant agrees to pay for their hot water rental and then stops paying for your hot water rental, it is quite probable that you may not get that money back, because without a hot water tank, you, the landlord, are not able to provide that vital service, which is hot water. So it's on you to pay, right? So these are things that you have to think about. Vital services are, being able to have sewer, like sewer proper flushing sewers, or, septic tanks that are in working order. They have to have anything. Here's another thing. Anything that comes affixed to your house, even if it's not in your lease agreement. So there's an air conditioner, it worked for a season, you blocked it off as not included, AC breaks, you have to fix it. Even though your lease says there's no AC, you have to fix it because the tenant had it for a season. It was attached to the house. Therefore, it's viewed as something that you provided and now is not available. So if you don't fix it, you have to discount rent. And if you don't discount rent, then you have to fix it. So that's kind of, from a Residential Tenancies Act, what you are responsible for as a landlord or a property manager. Now, as a business person, you're responsible to ensure that your assets is being managed in a way where its value is being preserved and increased, where your cash flow is increasing, right? So your bottom line should always be increasing year over year. So you need to look at preventative maintenance, because preventative maintenance is much cheaper than reactive maintenance, where now, my pipe exploded and now I have to fix everything. And then you also need to ensure that, like, your insurance is up to date, you've got the proper protection. So don't go for the cheapest type of insurance if you're living in an area, or I shouldn't say living, renting in an area where it's probable your tenants have friends who might be less than intelligent or less than responsible. And they could cause damage, boyfriends and girlfriends, or, partners decide that they're going to split up and somebody decides they want to cause damage, right? A bit extra in those kinds of areas to make sure that the tenant damages are covered through your insurance, because not all insurance is created, right? So it's your responsibility, or your property manager's responsibility, to understand that. And it's also your responsibility, or your property manager's responsibility, to understand what is changing in the market that you're in. So prime example, I'm dealing with a client of mine right now. She just purchased 3 properties in Hamilton in the last 90 days. Don't know what she was thinking. All the power to. Would I have purchased them? No. But hey, she wants to do it, no problem. So her first property that she purchased, I had mentioned to her that, Hamilton now has licensing requirements in certain regions. So here's a link, whatever your realtor sends you, check on this link to make sure it doesn't fall in that zone, because if it does, there's certain rules we have to follow. So we went through the first 2, she did that. The third one, at this point, I figured, using the same realtor, you guys have had this discussion, no problem. No, the realtor sold her a bungalow with an illegal secondary dwelling.
Oopsie.
And the realtor and my client discussed the realtor's boyfriend coming in and putting in a proper egress window and putting in a proper, sprinkler, just so it's all safe and everything should be fine, and we'll just look the other way. So I came back and I said, okay, great. So in September, when we need a license for this unit, what exactly do you want to do? Are we renting it now and kicking out the tenants and paying them for their inconvenience? Are we leaving it vacant? And it was like a situation of, oh, what? So here we go. Now we have a situation where the realtor's not so smart. Okay, they were not on the ball. They were a little bit more driven by closing a sale than maybe making sure that their client is protected. So that realtor is not familiar with what is going on, which is sad because this particular real estate agent is also being referred to investors as an investor savvy agent through some of these training programs, right? So you would think my client has now purchased a property that she at a minimum needs to spend about $60,000 to legalize if she
Whoa.
wants the additional $1,600 to $1,700 a month in rent. $1,700 a month in rent lost is not a small number, especially when today you're paying the kind of money that you're paying for property because it's a very hot market. So as a landlord or as a property manager, it's our responsibility to understand these things before we get all crazy. Because at a minimum, again, why are people selling non-performing assets, right? Nobody's going to sell an asset that's great. This is a beautiful home, recently renovated, Hamilton Mountain, which is a primo, area to be in, highly desirable. Why are you selling it? Well, now we know, right? Licensing came in, house went on the market, and here we go. So at least we could have turned around and done something where we had an extended closing. We could have worked with the sellers to at least be able to get, permits approved or drawings approved. So we knew what we were getting into. And this is something very important to understand as well, right? Not all property managers are created equal. So we own property in the United States, and my property managers, they make me want to just stick pencils in my ears. They're like, I just don't understand. And I explain to them, I do this for a living, and maybe this isn't something that, you're used to dealing with, but like what you're telling me doesn't make sense. And this is not how we run our business. And they say, oh, you don't understand my job. It's, okay, clearly we don't speak the same English. But not every property manager is built the same. So there are going to be multiple property managers in Hamilton who won't know that this licensing is happening, right? And they're not going to know to tell their clients these things, right? And there are going to be multiple, property managers who might know of it, but they don't know what's required. So when you're talking to a property manager, it's important to understand what they're supposed to be doing for you. Their job is not to fix your toilets. Anybody can fix your toilets. Some random dude named Craig on Craigslist can fix your toilets, right? That's not, and now we have like the Jiffy people who you go on there and,
Jiffy app, yeah.
Yeah, like you've got all kinds of stuff for people to fix things. That's not their job. Their job is to make sure that some professional psychopathic tenant doesn't get inside of your unit. That is like number one. And their job is to keep you and that tenant at a distance so that there is always somebody in the middle that says, I really need to ask, I don't have the authority to make that decision. So that when your tenant is irate, there's a moment for somebody to take them and cool them down so that everybody's able to think logically. Mm-hmm. And it's their job to make sure that your assets are protected, right? The guy on Jiffy's not going to do that. The guy on Jiffy will fix your toilet, no problem. Your paralegal can issue and notices if your tenant doesn't pay rent. But at that point, it's too late.
Yeah, they're essentially managing the tenant-landlord relationship on your behalf.
100%. And don't get me wrong, I am a self-managing investor, but none of my tenants know that those are my properties. I am just the property manager. You know what I mean? I drive a Honda Civic. I show up there. They think I am this overworked, underpaid woman that is answering emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh my God, they abuse you. Yes, they do. It's horrible. But they're never going to attack me personally. So when I tell them I'm going to do what I can, and then I come back and I tell them, oh, I can't do that right now for you, but we can do it in 3 months. They're not going to try and burn my house down. Right? Because they don't view me as the rich person who can afford my house and their house and who knows how many others. So it's not a matter of you have to hire somebody, but you have to find a system that will allow you that little bit of separation between you and your tenant. Obviously, you can't do that if you live upstairs and you're renting your basement suite. That's a little bit different, unfortunately. But when you own rental property, there has to be a way that you're going to create a system that will allow you to separate yourself. And it doesn't always include having to incorporate. You know what I mean? You can still own it in your personal name. They just don't need to know that you are, you know, Joe, I don't know, Schmo, who owns the house.
Yeah, from
You know,
that
you're John.
from that perspective, you could always open up a bank account with a doing business as and call it whatever.
Mhm.
And for $60, you get a different name on the check if anyone still gives checks anymore. And that's not your name. So why would they think it's you?
Yeah.
You're just collecting checks on behalf of.
100%. And you get a virtual
Yeah.
address, right? A proper
Yeah.
corporate address. And I'm not talking a Canada Post PO box, right? Like you want something where people, so as an example, right, we have virtual office space. So tenants can show up. And it's so funny because we have office space. So we own office space and we have virtual office space that we provide to other people. But my actual property management office is not that office because I'm at that office. So I rent virtual space elsewhere where there are 3 wonderfully beautiful, lovely, pleasant women who are there from 9 till 5. And if I have a tenant who's pissed off and wants to go there and scream at me, they're there to smile, offer them a coffee and tell them I'm not in and relay the message. So my tenant's never going to show up at my office, but other people's tenants might, right? They might show up at my office screaming and yelling at, you know, Joe Schmo. And I'm going to be like, I'm so sorry, he's not in at the moment. Let me take a message. Can I get you a coffee? And we do all of those things. So there are ways that you're able to separate yourself from the day-to-day that'll give you the ability to diffuse situations. Canada Post and UPS are not that solution, right? So what Michael is saying, same thing, operating as, right? Sole proprietors, you can have business names, these kinds of things where, you know, Michael will be able to help you kind of set that up where it's going to be the most beneficial for you from, you know, your personal financial taxation situations. And then your tenant never needs to know. Like never needs to know. And when you go and you look at property, if they ask you if you're the owner, you say, no, I'm their agent. The owner is not in the country. Full stop. I'm just here to take pictures and videos for them. You'll be the person, I'm the person you'll be dealing with. I'm going to be their agent here locally, but I'm not the owner. Full stop. You know, when we started out, I had like multiple personality disorder. My name was Sophie. My name was Lena. I had like 4 different people that they would call the office and I would answer the phone because I couldn't afford to pay anybody. And, you know, my husband's friends would be over and they're like, is your wife okay? And you got to do what you got to do to protect yourself, right? For your sanity. And that's the only thing, in my opinion, that matters.
I think what you're saying is also implicitly when you get to scaling, so you have more than 1 or 2 units, this becomes a real issue that you're going to want to take care of because you get enough tenants, you're going to have a bad one.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And I just want to say, when we say bad tenants, there are bad tenants and then there are professional tenants. And the number of professional tenants out there are not that great. Like they're really not. So if any of you are on these Facebook groups, the landlord groups, and you know, everybody's talking about how big they're getting screwed, that's not normal. Like that's not an actual normal occurrence. Like I have 163 tenants. If this was a normal occurrence, then I should at a minimum have what, 45, 50 of them who are paying rent. That I have 0 applications at the landlord and tenant board. 0. I have 1 tenant who's in arrears and he's 2 weeks in arrears. And we knew a month and a half beforehand because he was transitioning jobs because he had been laid off and given notice.
Yeah,
you know
I had one
I have people
tenant
who were crazy
that I had to kick out for cockroach issues.
Oh,
And even she paid in full. I think she paid late once, but other than that,
yeah.
she didn't walk away owing me any rent money.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of money spraying for cockroaches.
Which is not fun. It's not fun at all. But yeah, like bad tenants, you know, you have tenants who are gonna, I got an email on like Victoria Day Monday. That's like, I don't know, 17 paragraphs, look at exhibit A, 5A, and this and that. And I'm looking at this going, are you insane? Like, okay. So you get that kind of stuff. And that is not an ideal tenant that you want, but you, with experience, you learn how to handle people like this. So they expect me to be like, oh my God, my tenant's going to leave. They're so unhappy. I'm going to fix whatever you want. My response is, oh, okay, I'm not fully sure what it is that you want from me, because legally these are the things I'm supposed to do. And from your pictures, I've done all those things. But if you're not happy, I'm happy to let you go with less than 30 days notice, refund your last month rent. Let me know.
Yeah.
So they don't want to go. Their unit's brand new. The rent is below market. So you just need to understand, right? You have to understand the people that you're dealing with, and you can take a bad tenant and, if nothing else, keep them under control so that they don't take
Right.
over your life.
Yeah. And I think that is the key. A good property manager can do that for you.
100%. 100%.
Okay, well, that kind of leads into, what does successful property management look like, whether you're doing it yourself or you're hiring someone to do it for you?
I used to say no gray hairs, but I have so many gray hairs now that I can't say that anymore. Like, I'm going to be a total platinum blonde by, the time I'm 45. Okay. So in all seriousness, successful property management, landlording, whatever you want to call it, is going to result in you, the landlord, being able to sleep a full night, not stressing about where your next mortgage payment is going to come from, having the ability to actually enjoy your life. So you're able to go away for a long weekend without worrying that somebody's going to call you and your toilet's going to be clogged and there's nobody to fix it. Your property values are going up, not just because of appreciation, because let's be serious, we can't eat appreciation, right? And if the bank decides they're not going to refinance, it's just magic money that doesn't really exist, whatever. But if you have a value where your income is going up, your expenses are being managed and maintained and reduced, and you're able to leverage that and continue to grow, you're doing something right. You have tenants who respect you, that are speaking to you kindly, that, are actually maintaining and taking care of your property as if it's their own. You're doing something right. And if you're not living in fear of, oh my God, like, if the toilet bursts, or if I lose some shingles, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. Or if my tenant doesn't pay me rent for the next 3, 4, 5 months, what am I going to do? There's a situation, right? So have a cushion. You're renting a house in Ontario. If it's your first property, have 6 months on the side, because if that tenant doesn't pay you, you need that cushion, right? So these are things that you want to know and plan for so that you can sleep. I'm not saying you're not going to have bad tenants. Quite frankly, if you don't have a tenant threaten to sue you, take you to tribunal, yell at you, scream at you, spit at you, call you all kinds of horrible names, like, what are you doing? That's like the best part. That's how you know you're doing it right. You're buying distressed pieces of crap and forcing up their value. You can't do that with good people in them, right? So it's going to happen, but it shouldn't happen all the time. Once you stabilize that property, you shouldn't have those problems.
Right. So what would you say is the current state of the rental market in the GTA?
Oh, so right now it's a renter's market, contrary to what anybody wants to say. Tenants complain about how expensive it is. Oh my God, you can't find anything. And landlords complain about how horrible tenants are. Right now, thanks to COVID, you have a lot of really good tenants who aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. They are not leaving. And you have a whole bunch of tenants that decided to keep their rent, that are getting evicted and looking for new housing. On top of that, in Hamilton especially, you have Metrolinx that has purchased a whole bunch of properties for their new GO stations, and all of their displaced tenants are being relocated. And Metrolinx needs to get these people relocated in order to be able to get their properties demolished and get their construction started. So Metrolinx assists in falsifying information and documents for these tenancy applications. Just as an FYI. So the type and quality of tenant that you're getting right now, because the prices have gone up so high, right? So rent in Hamilton, I'm going to use as an example, only because I have 6 vacancies right now in Hamilton. And I filled 37 last year, and I'm just comparing like last year to this year. So a basement apartment in the midst and in like the total peak of the pandemic in Hamilton, 2 bedrooms was renting for like $1,850 plus utilities. Craziness, insanity. And that same unit a year and a half earlier was renting for $1,450. Okay. This year, that unit is going for about $1,700. But because all the people who had like migrated from Toronto to Hamilton because they were all working from home are now back at work part-time, they've all migrated back to the GTA and they're taking advantage of the drop in condo rent. Right? So they all went to Hamilton, jacked up all the rents because they were like, I paid $1,800 for a 250 square foot bachelor apartment, and now I'm getting, you know, a 700 square foot 2-bedroom basement. $1,900, give me the unit. So they all went, they jacked up the rents, they left. The landlords who went off and purchased all the property in Hamilton with these jacked up rents out of fear that the bank rates are going up and property prices are going to go up and inflation is coming, you got to buy now, have now purchased based on these $1,900 rents. They don't want to budge, and rents are now going down because those people who were renting have left the city. And now you're left with people who want to like cohabitate. So I've been showing units to people who are like 6 adults and we all want to rent this 2-bedroom basement. And it's not 1, it's not 2, it's like a regularly occurring thing. The quality of the tenant who's coming is not that young professional that we were getting a year and a half ago, right? Like I made a joke to my husband, which wasn't really a joke, but it was. And I was like, you know, 6 out of my 8 showings today were all missing their bottom teeth. Not something I'm used to seeing in the Hamilton Mountain. Right? So, I mean, what you're getting in terms of like quality of tenant, the good ones are not leaving their units. So it's all of the people being displaced. It's all like the troublesome people or the people who've kind of been in the same place for a really long time. And now their landlords are taking advantage of the market, and, you know, their new landlords are getting them out because the rents are low. It's a very difficult situation. People can't afford to live. So now units are sitting vacant and tenants have a lot to choose from. So now they're able to negotiate. And now they've also gotten very smart in how to lie to get what they want. And landlords are being sold a lot of different products to help them, right? So you've got a lot of tenant screening applications and websites and all of these things that they say, you know, come on here and you're going to report your tenant, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And landlords don't realize that these brand new services don't actually have a database yet. So you're not getting anything, right? We use somebody like Rent Check that's been around for like 40 some odd years, and they've got a database of like 10,000, 15,000 tenants. So every time I pull somebody's report, there is somebody who's reported them because they've been around for so long. They're expensive, yes, but I can pull US, I can pull Canadian. So I see what they have going on. If they're coming from the United States, I see what's been going on here. And I've seen history for a long time because they've been around a long time. So because of this, tenants know and they're taking advantage. So it's not the right time to be uneducated as a landlord at all. Because the troublesome people right now are looking to rent. The good ones are staying put because it's getting expensive.
Okay. Now you touched on it before, but the landlord tenant board, is that a scary thing to have to deal with, or what's been your experience?
So my experience has been great with the landlord and tenant board. To be completely honest with you, I've never had an issue. So I hear all of these stories about like, I don't get my order and it's taken me, you know, 8 months to get a hearing, and all kinds of insanity. And I don't go to the tenant board often. I've developed a very good way of getting rid of tenants before we need to get to that point. I'm very encouraging. I can help people see the right decisions for themselves. It's a skill that I have developed so I've been doing this for 18 years. Just to give you guys an idea, we bought our first triplex in 2004. So, I mean, it's been a long time as well. I wasn't born to be able to do this. I learned. So when you know what you're doing, it's not a scary thing. When you don't know what you're doing, it's terrifying, right? You have a lot of real estate agents who offer property management services. Like, please beware. I have a friend of mine, and they're renting a house, and the realtor is trying to get them out because she wants to sell the house, right? And they're posting notices that are completely like, hey, it's illegal to post notices on your tenant's front door, so please don't do that. Only the sheriff is allowed to do that. Everything else needs to be in an envelope, completely sealed, private. And then they're signing things for 45 days notice when it's a 60-day notice. Like, hello, what are you doing? So, my friend is sitting there going, well, I know this is not legal, and I'm just going to wait. So that realtor who thinks that because your lease ended, now you have to go, is going to be in for a very rude awakening. And if her client is under the impression that the house is going to be ready for sale at the end of the lease term, that client is going to be in for a very rude awakening, right? And when you go to LTV, your entire thing is getting thrown out because your paperwork isn't even right. Even if you have a legitimate claim, even if what you're saying is true, it's going to get thrown out because they didn't do the paperwork correctly. So LTV is scary when you don't know what you're doing, right? You can hire a really good paralegal. You do not need a property manager. Technically, your property manager can't be representing you at the LTV anyway, unless they're the person who signed the lease with that tenant, right? So if you had a tenant prior and then you hire a property manager, you can't have that property manager representing you on that tenant's case because that property manager didn't execute that lease. You need to have a paralegal, just as an FYI. And again, if you don't know these things, your cases can get thrown out, right? So you have to have a property manager who's willing to tell you these things honestly. But it's a long process if you don't know what you're doing. And that is what's scary about it. Once you're there, my advice to every landlord is don't say anything, present your case, answer questions when you're asked, keep your answers very short, let the tenant go off on their tangents, and you will win. When you're going off on the tangents, I guarantee you're going to lose. You're going to say something that you shouldn't have said, right? That's number one. Number two, if you think that even there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little probability that you're not in the right, don't even go there. Find another way to resolve your situation and then bring on a paralegal. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to wait 8 months for hearing only to get it thrown out, because then you have to start all over again. So if you cannot, like, I tell my tenants to sue me all the time. Every time that they threaten me that they're going to take me to the LTV, I send them the link for the tenant application they need to fill out for their complaint. And then I tell them I'm happy to fill it out for them if they need help. That's how confident I am in what it is that I'm doing, right? And if I wasn't that confident, I'm not even going to argue with the tenant. I'm going to try and find a way to make this problem go away. Okay, let me see what I can do to make it better. Because if I'm not that confident, the likelihood of me winning at tribunal is not high. So why am I wasting my time? But when my tenant is like 110% in the wrong, I will fill out the form. Sue me, let's go, let's have fun. And when I do that, they threaten me with their lawyers. I'm like, please give them my number. I would love to talk to whoever it is that's going to take on this case.
Well,
like,
I know,
love to.
I know that's a lie, because no lawyer will take on a case at the landlord tenant board because they can't charge enough. There's not enough money in it.
And then what, you're paralegal? Okay, let's talk to them too. No problem. I am not worried. That's the kind of confidence you want to have. And when you have that confidence, it's not scary. Tenants are not scary. Okay, tenants are people. And professional tenants find uneducated, naive landlords to take advantage of. A professional tenant will never waste their time with me. Ever. Like, there's no way. I don't have professional tenants. I don't have anybody in my unit who understands the law better than me. I don't have anybody in my unit who is able to take advantage of the law and drag things out with appeals or anything else, because they know from the minute that they get my 13-page rental application, they know that they're not dealing with, some newbie who is just out to make a couple of bucks, as they think, our mentalities are. So confidence is very important, and education, knowing your stuff. Don't put out illegal ads that violate the human rights charter. Okay. You're like putting targets on yourself. You'll see this in the landlord groups as well. Do you think I can avoid tenants if I put this, and this in my ad? No, you're going to attract them because they know you have no idea what's going on. Nobody in their right mind who understands the law would put those things in there, right? So it's a multifaceted thing. And when you understand those things and you've got fully compliant ads that say, you know, I've got an office on the main floor that can be used as an office, a playroom, a craft room, or any other room that you want, because I don't want to say that I discriminated and tried to only rent to professionals who work from home or only rent to families because it was a playroom. Right? And then you've got other people who are like close to the university, students only. Where's your professional tenant going to go? Right? You guys need to understand that as well. When you do, it's not scary at all. In my opinion, it's not a scary business. We wouldn't have survived 18 years if it was, to be completely honest, because we buy scary property. So it's not a scary business. It's scary because you haven't educated yourself to begin with. Most people don't end up at the landlord and tenant board because they know how to avoid it. That's it. And the people on Facebook are the ones who didn't take the time and now just want to complain. Okay, that's okay too.
Wait a minute, let me get this straight. Are you saying that people on the internet complain about things?
Sometimes, didn't you know?
Wow.
And everything they say is true too. Didn't you know that?
Well,
Everything they say
if it's
is
written
true.
down, it's obviously true.
If it's on Google, it's true.
Yeah.
And if you can't find it in Google, therefore it's not. So that's the other thing too, right? Like you've got to make sure that I tell people, I have tenants now who want to get references for me as a property manager, right? Because they want to talk to my tenants to see whether or not I'm a good property manager. So my response has been, please go read my Google reviews. They're all true. If you treat me like crap, I'm a horrible, horrible person to deal with. So those reviews are absolutely true. And if you're a good tenant, I'm wonderful. Because I've got reviews, right? Tenants think now, oh, Google's a big deal. So I'm going to go give you a bad review and you're going to give me what I want. No, I'm not. Not even close. Now I'm just going to make things more difficult for you. Because what are you going to do? Give me another bad review? Okay.
That ship has sailed at that point.
Yeah, seriously, like, okay, sure, no problem. Every time you give me a bad review, don't you notice the 5 good ones that show up? Like, obviously I have a system for this too. But yeah, so, oh, man, yeah, it's not that scary up there. My opinion, personal, it's not that scary. As long as you're not overpaying for property, as long as you've got a cushion, and as long as you have a basic understanding of what you can and can't do, like, whatever lease agreement or tenancy agreement your tenant has when you buy a property, you're bound to that agreement, whether you agree with it or not, right? You can't come in as the new landlord and demand leases. You can't come in and demand new forms of payment. It's not allowed, right? And if you go off and you do that, because we have landlord groups and tenants have tenant groups, and those groups are even more like, let me help you. So you don't want your tenant to show up on Facebook and be like, I just had somebody buy my property and they said this, because the advice that they're going to get is going to make your life miserable, like miserable. So whatever that tenancy was and is, do not buy thinking that you're going to be able to change it. You cannot. So if it doesn't work as it is, do not buy the property. Don't. It has to work as it is right now today. And you have to be able to handle it in the situation and then the condition that it is in today. If you cannot do those two things, this is not the property for you. It's going to leave you with a bad taste in your mouth, and you're going to want to get out of the landlording game because it's a scam. It's not. It works. It's great.
Okay, now I was wondering if you get involved with this, what to my knowledge is a fairly new trend, which is getting rid of tenants by paying them to leave, the so-called cash for keys maneuver. No.
So first, there are 2 things that I say. One, I don't negotiate with terrorists. I'm allowed to say that because I'm Iranian and I'm deemed a terrorist. It's just, I'm gonna put that out there first. Please don't say these things. It's not very nice, and I'm going to get canceled one day. But, you know, as an Iranian who by the president of the United States was deemed an axis of evil,
Yes.
I don't negotiate with people who are trying to extort. Never going to happen. But my exit strategy as a landlord has never been, I'm going to get them out for a rent eviction, or I'm going to just say that I'm moving in myself to get rid of my tenant. That has never been my strategy. It should never be your strategy. I see, recommendations from people that are like, oh, don't sign 12-month leases because you're not going to be able to issue an N12. An N12 is a notice to terminate the tenancy because
Right.
you, the owner, want to take possession, or somebody in your immediate family, so a parent or child wants to take over. That should never be your exit, ever. Like ever. Because why are you buying the property? I understand if it's your home, you're getting relocated for work, and then you have to come back. That I can understand, right? You didn't intend for this to be a rental. It's a situation. You don't want to sell your house because maybe we can't get back into the market today with the prices the way they've gone. I get it. But like, don't go buying property thinking that you're going to be able to do this. So cash for keys, never. If I'm in a situation where, let's say, we do have a tenant whom we need to remove, right? And my cash for keys negotiations have only ever been, we're not going to come after you legally the way I'm allowed to come after you for all the money you owe me if you leave. That is about as much negotiating as I've ever done.
Okay.
Right? I've never, ever, ever paid a tenant. We've had to serve N13s, which is renovation, like I'm demolishing the unit or we're converting the unit or whatever that is, and now you got to go. So we've done those, and I've either been able to place my tenant in new units, which means my clients or myself, we haven't had to pay the tenants to leave, or we've given them enough notice and helped them find housing where the legal compensation they're entitled to is more than sufficient for them. Right? I have had clients who legitimately needed to evict a tenant because they've had, a family situation, there's been a divorce or something. In those situations, we've offered to pay first and last at a new location, pay first and last at the new location, not pay my tenant, pay the new landlord first and last. We've offered to hire and pay for the movers, plus give them the 1-month compensation that they're due. Generally speaking, when you have a good relationship with your tenant, you don't have to negotiate cash for keys in an obscene way where it's like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, right? That happens because your tenant doesn't believe you, they don't trust you, you don't have a good relationship.
Okay, well, thanks so much for all that information. At this point, I'd
pleasure.
like to open it up to see if anyone has any questions. Just unmute yourself and ask your question. In the meantime, I'll put up your contact information, which people should now see. So if anyone has any questions, please unmute and ask your question.
Hey,
Hi.
Zach here. I'm actually a mortgage broker, so I hopped on to get a little more information myself and learn a bit more about property management. I did not really a question, but that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Lots of great info in there, and I myself have started to work with a lot more first-time investors or accessing equity, buying rental properties, trying to navigate that whole area. And it seems like I'm getting an influx of more, as well as just investors in general that have 2-3 investment properties and kind of looking to optimize their mortgage side of things and lower costs and all that sort of deal. So that was great info. I'm definitely going to connect with you and potentially add you to my list to refer with for potential
Absolutely.
clients, and love to have a phone call with you in the future just
sure.
to introduce
Just
myself a bit more as well.
To give you guys an idea as well, like our company manages properties. So our portfolio, my personal portfolio, is all in Eastern Ontario in the Ottawa Valley. So we've got a huge team out there. And then we cover, once you get through like Cornwall all the way out to Ottawa in the valley, we go from Oshawa all the way to Niagara Falls and then to Brantford, like Hamilton, Brantford, Innisfil, Bradford, and all of that. So, I mean, we've got a huge territory that we cover. Also because we're very efficient in how we do things and the teams that we have in place. So we can definitely help in a multitude of areas for investors who are looking to still find cash flow.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I'm big proponent or perpetuating not just buying a condo in the GTA or in Toronto. That's going to be more difficult for you to make any money and not rely on what you said. I like that line. I'm going to steal it. You can't eat appreciation, which is which I'm a big like, yes, that's definitely going to grow your net worth and generational net worth and all that sort of deal, and leave some to pass on. But you definitely want something that's going to make you some money in the interim as well, right? So yeah, that was fantastic. That was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thanks for all the
Thank
info.
you. Thank you. I look forward to speaking with you.
Zach, one of my proudest moments as a accountant was convincing a client to sell a property that was losing money every month
Ugh.
because it was strictly an appreciation play.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, this is crazy. Because you're banking on, well, everyone knows real estate only goes up, right? You know that. Lena knows that. George knows that. Everyone knows that. Well, that's actually not really true. And you don't want to get stuck in a situation where the property value drops. And now when it comes to refinance, which you're obviously involved in, they'll only refinance it at, 80% of what
Yeah,
the mortgage
up
was
to 80, yeah.
before. You got a big problem if you're dipping into your pocket every month on top of that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're making money every month, you can put aside a cushion that will
Yeah.
help out if there is a dramatic.
Well, that's why I also recommend and push people, especially people with maybe 2 rental properties, or they're trying to dip their toes into more, is you need to have some home equity lines as well attached. Just don't touch them. Don't do anything. That can be your buffer. I like you said, Lena, with like 6 months buffer, 100%, have that in savings or investments or liquid that you can tap into. But then I also say, if we're refinancing, let's put 100K. If there's room, let's put 100K line of credit on here. Don't touch it, don't use it, but it's there for you. Now you have an extra safety net, whether it goes up or down. Now you don't have to refinance to save your ass or whatever. You have something there as well that you can use. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
As we covered last month, Zach, there are hybrid products, as you're probably aware of, that involve both a mortgage and a line of credit that you can set up. And that gives you exactly what you're talking about, built into what would otherwise be just a standard mortgage. And
yeah, there's a great MCAP fusion product that it can actually start the line of credit at $1. And as you pay down the principal on the mortgage, it just increases. So you don't have to qualify with, a lot of lenders have a minimum 25, 50K, whatever line of credit that you have to add, where that fusion product is something that I push if MCAP makes sense as the lender. Start it at $1, whatever. You don't touch it. It's just going to keep growing as you pay down the principal. So that's something as well, especially for real estate investors, that I push on certain buying your first or second property just as a backup.
And Scotia has a step product that functions in a similar way, but I think you're right. They have a minimum.
Yeah, you have to start it at a certain minimum. And then especially if you're going up to 80%, well, you don't even have access to that until you either pay down the mortgage more or the appreciation grows, and then you can actually tack on that line of credit.
Right. Okay.
Wow. It's good to know.
Any other questions?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, first of all, thanks both of you, Lena and Michael, for the awesome presentation. I learned a lot. Took so many notes, my hand is kind of hurting.
Yay! Hooray for carpal tunnel.
My name is Abby, and I'm actually recently getting into real estate investing. So still kind of learning the ropes, and I think you brought up a lot of good points. So right now where I am is I do have one condo, and it's being rented, but I'm actually, the tenants let me know they're actually going to move out in a few months, and I'm going to have to find new tenants.
Yep.
So I guess, do you have any tips on, I guess, how to screen or catch red flags during screening? Because I know you mentioned you use a company to cross-reference, and then you also mentioned there's a lot of people trying to cheat the system with falsifying documents.
Yes. Okay. Wow. So what I would suggest, number one, is obviously pre-screen before. So number one, have a good rental application, right? Like you need to have a good, thorough rental application. My rental application is, I think, 13 pages long. It's not because I'm asking a substantial amount of information. It's just, it's thorough, it's laid out nicely, it's aesthetic to look at, it's got, details of what happens once you get approved and when you submit your deposit, and, it complies to all the things that I needed to comply to so that I can pull credit, but it also asks for a lot of information that will allow me to hunt down a tenant if they decide not to pay their rent. So that right there is going to deter a professional tenant, because they know that I know what I should be looking for. Something that we do, we actually did it prior to COVID, but we did it now all the time because of COVID. We sent rental applications out before we showed the unit, right? So if you're willing to fill out my application, then you're serious about my unit. So now we're going to go and take a look. And this gives you an idea of who it is that you're dealing with, in terms of who is looking to come in there. You want to make sure, so a lot of the payroll, especially the stubs that are being doctored, are either coming from Shopify's pay platform or an APS. So you just want to kind of look at the small details on your pay stubs. For people who don't run payroll, you're not going to know that, but like every time your payroll has been issued, that number changes, right? So if you've got 5 stubs that all have the same kind of issued amount, it's not normal, right? You know that it's been copied and pasted and the date's been changed, right? Because that number should also change every time you issue a new payment, because that's what they're keeping track of. You also want to kind of have an idea of what income taxes should look like for somebody who earns $150,000 versus a person who earns 45 or 50, because your tax amount deducted is going to be very different. And not everybody who doctors documentation understands this. And I say this only because I've gotten doctor documentation submitted to me by, again, real estate agents who aren't as savvy and whatever else that is, right? They're just doing what they're doing because it's what their client gave them. And I'm looking at this going, no. So that's another thing. Yeah, and then just don't be afraid to be difficult with your prospect. That is the only other thing that I'm going to say, is don't be afraid to be difficult. So people who seem very confrontational or seem very impatient when they're sending out requests, especially on Facebook Marketplace, which, believe it or not, is actually quite popular right now to find and fill vacancies. And you find great tenants. Like I have an MP, like a member of parliament, who is renting from me, and his wife came to me through Facebook. It's not just crazy people who are going to be on there stalking you, but don't be afraid to get difficult with them, And when I say difficult, so as an example, I get people who are very impatient with me, or they're very rude or whatever else. And then I just kind of return the favor. Excuse me. And the reason I do that is because when you start to push a person's buttons, the way that they react is going to tell you how they're going to treat you when something goes wrong in the rental unit, right? So if I have somebody who's screaming and yelling at me because I forgot how much I was charging for rent, can you imagine what they're going to do to me if, like, in the middle of the afternoon, their stove isn't working and they're trying to cook dinner? Like, they're going to be insane. So is that a personality type that I want to deal with? So don't be afraid to do those kinds of things. And then just get very familiar with what your obligations are under the Human Rights Tribunal, so that you don't post ads, because a lot of people right now think that that's a very easy way of getting paid, is just to find people that they can sue. COVID has created a lot of very strange behaviors in people who unfortunately may be struggling or have been left unemployed with a lot of time to think and read, conspiracy theories and Google and Facebook. So just make sure that you have that understanding as well. Right. And, you can hire people to just find you a tenant, right? You don't have to keep them forever. They can just place a tenant for you and you don't have to worry about it. And then you come on after. There's that too.
Great. Thank you. So a lot of
my pleasure.
tips.
Sorry, I talk a lot.
So what was your corporation again? Your property management?
So we're NV Property Management. So N like Nancy, V like Victor, Property Management.
Okay.
And sorry, do you offer just that service as well then? So you find tenants and then say you self-manage, whatever, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do all kinds of stuff. Like we can set up a landlord to self-manage, but use our tools and our systems, right? So it's kind of like we come in as a consultant and we set you up to become your own property manager, right? So for us, we're very, the way that our property management company came to be because we bought property, we couldn't find property managers, and that was it, right? So the way that we manage our portfolio and the portfolio of our clients is exactly the same. Everything we created was created for us. And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel or try and do something different because I don't know the property, right? So the system was created in a way where when I was in Toronto and my husband at the time, we weren't married yet, he was in Ottawa, I had systems and things for him to go in and follow when I wasn't able to go, right? So I have a binder and it's like, you know, property management for dummies type thing. And all of the forms are numbered like section 1, form 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So, you know, these are all the forms I go through before I go to section 2. And it walks you through the whole tenant life cycle, as we put it, right? And I used to teach property management. Like I used to teach a course. Obviously, we haven't done that in a long time, but we do have that ability. So if landlords want to self-manage, but they want to have those tools, we can do that for them as well. Like we have a lot of things that we can do to help kind of resolve the gap, because not everybody can afford property managers today with the way that, you know, the cost of purchasing is and the rents are. Like they can't afford to pay that 5-6% that some people are asking, and a lot of them are getting greedy. They're going up into 8%, 10% for like condos, brand new condos. What are you doing that you need to charge that much money for? Like, come on.
I think that's sort of the fear of first time investors too, are like, well, property management company, that's going to be all my potential profit, or take me from cash flow neutral to negative type deal, right? It's like I've just barely budgeted for this to kind of maintain. Well, that's going to take away from me making any money, right? So
yeah. And it's true. Sometimes it is that kind of that breaking point. So we have solutions that will help bridge that gap. Like we had at one point an opportunity for landlords to, because we have a very robust management software system that we use with online portals for owners and tenants and maintenance and all that stuff. And we had an opportunity for landlords to come in and pay a small monthly subscription, and they would be able to access and use our portal. So they were actually an agent or an employee, it would appear to their tenants, of NV Property Management, because their tenants would go on to NV's website. They would log in, they would submit the request, and the landlord would come in and respond. But then that landlord had access to the trades that we use in the area. If they were ever going away, we could jump on to kind of resolve any issues. If they got in a situation where they didn't know how to handle the tenants, like, you know, insanity, we could jump on and kind of handle it on their behalf, and nobody would know, right? They all assumed that it was an agent from Envy. So we had that offer as well for quite some time. And then we're in the process of kind of just rebuilding certain things, and then we'll offer that again as well. And those solutions started at like $29.99 a month.
yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So we have a lot of options because at the end of the day, cash flow is king, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on that note, what do you think is like, I guess, how would you know if you're paying too much for property management services? Like there's lots of different companies out there, right? And
yeah. How would you know if you're paying too much? Okay, so if you have a brand new condo that you're buying, or any pre-construction home that is under a Tarion warranty, in my opinion, right, your manager shouldn't be charging you more than like 5, maybe 6%, right? Maybe 6%. And only because the amount of work involved is not a lot, right? Like every time there's an issue, it's a Tarion issue, right? That I would dispatch the builder, or you would dispatch the builder, because you're going to get notification. But what I would really find out from your property manager is what type of system and software are they using? Because if you've got a property manager who doesn't use software and uses Excel, what are they charging you money for? Like, what are you doing? Seriously, because at the end of the day, I'm depending on somebody to call, and I'm depending on the person who answered the call to remember to write something down and then dispatch somebody and then follow up. So the likelihood of things falling through the cracks is very high. And I only say this to you because the reason I have the management software that we have, and it's as robust as it is because I had a total meltdown driving home from Jordan Station, Ontario to Ottawa, because we had, 45 properties, and I just couldn't take it anymore. It was too much. Like things were falling through the cracks. And I told my husband that we were shutting it down. I didn't want to do it anymore. And he said, if I can find a solution, are you okay? And this is how we have the system that we have, right? So if you've got a management company who's got online portals for you, online portals for your tenants, they do real-time reporting. So what that means is when you log on as an owner, you know exactly how much money your tenant has paid in rent. You know exactly how much maintenance is pending, potentially being spent, or has already been spent, and how much money you are getting that month as a payout from your management company. If your manager is charging you 6%, 7%, in my opinion, that's fair because it's not cheap for that kind of software, right? And because they have that software, things aren't falling through the cracks. So the type of maintenance you're getting will be preventative. It's not going to be reactive. You shouldn't be seeing things that are super expensive all the time. That's one. Number two, is your property manager willing to use trades that you have worked with successfully and that you would prefer to work with, assuming that obviously they're licensed and insured when needed? If the answer is no, it's probably because the people they use, they're marking up or they're getting a kickback and you're paying for it. So do you want to pay for that? You know what I mean? Like, do you want to be paying on top of maintenance to somebody who's already charging you versus a property manager who's going to be very honest with you and say, okay, if I have to rehab this entire apartment when your tenant leaves and I'm coordinating 15 different trades, I'm charging you a project management fee, right? It's a one-time fee based on the scope of the project because it's a lot of work. And it is. Proper project management is very time consuming. That's different, right? But they're willing to use your electrician, let's say, who's only going to charge you $45 an hour versus 65 outside or 145 outside, right? So these are things to kind of look at. And then just how do they function as a whole? Like, what are their philosophies? Are they talking a lot about, you know, how many tenants do they deal with? What is their view on tenants? Are they great tenants? Are tenants bad? Or landlord, like, you know, are we in a bad situation where we're all to get screwed because the landlord and tenant board is out to get us? If your property manager tells you that, run, just run. Like, if your property manager thinks that the landlord and tenant board is out to screw you, run the other way. That is like the first thing maybe you should ask is what their viewpoint is of tenants in Ontario and landlord rights.
Awesome. Actually, you kind of made me aware of a lot of things that I wouldn't have asked if I
Sorry.
were ever to go with the PF. No, this is awesome. Thank you.
Good. That's the point. Right, Michael?
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing that Lena mentioned, Terion, and for people that aren't aware,
Right.
Terion runs a warranty program for all new homes. And as the purchaser of said new home, you get to send them a list of all the deficiencies in your mind that need to be repaired by the builder or addressed by the builder in some fashion. So that's what Terion does.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Abby, Zach, anything else? Okay, well, I think that's it then. Thank you so much,
My
Lena,
pleasure.
for sharing your many years of experience with us.
We should do one of like just stories from the trenches so people can actually have some like laughter. Be like,
No,
no, that never happened.
I want people to buy real estate. I don't want to scare them off.
But like, if we tell microwave gun stories and be like, and 18 years later, I still love what I do, that should be even more encouraging.
Maybe, maybe. Anyway, thanks so much. Really appreciate your
pleasure.
joining us
There we go.
tonight. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
People have seen your contact information, but if you need to get a hold of Lena and you can't find it, by all means, reach out to me. I'd be happy
Absolutely.
to connect. the
He
two
will
of
make
you.
sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, and
you.
we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Have a great night. Thank you. It was nice to meet
Thanks,
you
guys.
both.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
you too, Lena.
Bye, you guys. Bye.